The shot cracked through the blizzard like the voice of God himself. Master Chief Nash Drummond watched through his scope as the enemy commander, 800 meters distant, protected behind 2 feet of reinforced concrete and a wall of swirling snow, dropped like a puppet with severed strings. The man's blood painted the white ground red before the sound of the rifle even reached Nash's position. His blood turned to ice water. That shot was impossible. The angle, the wind, the distance. The visibility was less than 50 meters in this God-forsaken storm, yet someone had just threaded a bullet through conditions that would make most snipers pack up and go home. Someone had just eliminated the one man coordinating this entire ambush with a single round fired from a position Nash couldn't even identify. But Nash knew that signature. He'd seen it before. 3 years ago, before Lieutenant Kira Ashford died on a frozen ridge while he followed her orders and ran like a coward. "Who fired that shot?" Nash demanded into his radio, his voice cracking despite 17 years of training that should have kept it steady. Static answered him. Then, cutting through the interference like a blade through flesh, a voice he thought he'd never hear again. "Ambush 200 meters northeast. 4 hostiles in the tree line. Wait." The voice was female, hard, colder than the wind that was trying to freeze them all solid. It carried the precision of someone who'd spent too long without speaking her native language. Someone who'd forgotten how to waste words. Nash's hands started shaking, not from the cold. "Kira?" he whispered. A pause, then with something that might have been dark amusement. "You always followed instructions poorly, Commander. I said wait, not whisper like an idiot." The convoy hit had been textbook perfect, too perfect. Nash had known something was wrong the moment the first RPG turned their lead vehicle into a fireball. But by then, it was already too late. His 8-man SEAL team and Dr. Emily Carter, the cryptographer whose brain supposedly held secrets worth more than all their lives combined, were pinned in a kill box that had clearly been designed specifically for them. Someone had sold them out. The terrain was wrong. The intelligence was wrong. Everything about this extraction mission had gone sideways so fast that Nash barely had time to process it before Petty Officer Derek Lawson was screaming in his ear. "Chief! Chief, you hit?" "Negative. Sound off." The responses came rapid fire through the chaos. Martinez, Webb, Torres, Kowalski, Reeves, Chen. 7 voices, 7 men still breathing in a world that was doing its absolute best to kill them all. 2 others weren't responding. Nash had seen why. Their bodies lay crumpled near the burning vehicles, torn apart by the initial strike. Good men, young men, men with families who would receive folded flags and empty promises about honor and sacrifice. 8 operators down to 7 in 90 seconds. "Someone shut her up," Nash barked as Dr. Carter's screams rose above the gunfire. "I've got her," Martinez shouted back, grabbing the scientist and pulling her behind cover. "Doc, you need to be quiet, right now. They're tracking sound." The woman choked back her terror, but her eyes stayed locked on the bodies of the men who died trying to protect her. She was maybe 35, brilliant enough that 3 governments wanted her dead, and completely unprepared for the reality of what it meant when violence professionals came calling. Nash scanned the terrain through his scope. 40-plus hostiles, maybe 50. The lightly defended compound from the intelligence brief was nowhere in evidence. Instead, they'd walk straight into a prepared ambush position with overlapping fields of fire and enough firepower to hold off a full platoon. "Chief, we're pinned," Webb reported, his voice tight with controlled fear. "I count 3 machine gun positions. They're boxing us in." "I see them." What Nash didn't say was that he saw no way out. Every tactical option he ran through his head ended the same way, with more American bodies in the snow and another mission failure to add to his collection of ghosts. They couldn't advance. The enemy had superior numbers in position. They couldn't retreat. The path behind them was already cut off. They couldn't hold. Ammunition was finite. Reinforcements weren't coming for 40 minutes. And 40 minutes might as well be 40 years when you were bleeding out in the snow. "Chief," Torres shouted, "movement on our 6. They're flanking." That's when the first impossible shot came. The enemy commander had been directing the assault from a protected position 800 meters to the northeast. Nash had spotted him through thermal imaging, a heat signature barking orders into a radio, coordinating the systematic destruction of Nash's team with the calm efficiency of a professional. The man had been untouchable. The angle was wrong. The wind was gusting at 35 knots. The snow was so thick that visibility was measured in feet, not meters. Even if Nash had wanted to take the shot, and he'd considered it, the mathematics made it suicide. Bullet drop at that range in these conditions would require calculations that took minutes to work out. Wind drift alone would push the round 6 feet off target, maybe more. The temperature was cold enough to affect powder burn rates, which meant velocity inconsistencies that even experienced snipers struggled to compensate for in field conditions. It was a shot that belonged in a training manual under the chapter titled, "Don't Even Try." Someone had just made it look easy. For a moment, just one heartbeat, the gunfire actually paused. Even the enemy seemed confused. Their commander had been there, and then he hadn't, and the impossibility of the shot left everyone temporarily frozen in disbelief. "What the hell?" Lawson breathed into the radio. Nash's head snapped around, scanning his team through the blowing snow. Every operator was pinned down, heads low, weapons oriented toward the enemy positions to the north and east. None of them had line of sight to the commander's position. None of them could have made that shot. "That came from our 6 o'clock, Lawson said, his voice carrying an edge of something that might have been fear. "We don't have anyone there, Chief." Nash felt something cold settle in his chest that had nothing to do with the weather. He'd been doing this work for 17 years. He knew the difference between lucky shots and impossible ones. He knew the signature of every sniper he'd ever worked with, the rhythm, the patience, the particular brand of violence that separated amateurs from artists. This shot had a signature, one he recognized, one that belonged to someone who'd been declared killed in action 3 years ago in these same God-forsaken mountains. "No," he whispered to himself, "that's not possible." The mission had been classified then. It was still classified now. But Nash remembered every second of it with a kind of crystal clarity that trauma brands into your brain. They'd been inserted into the Hindu Kush to eliminate a high-value target, some warlord whose name Nash had forgotten, but whose face still appeared in his nightmares. The operation should have been clean. Quick insertion, faster elimination, extraction before dawn. Instead, they'd walked into a meat grinder. The blizzard had come out of nowhere, turning a surgical strike into a desperate scramble for survival. Their team, 10 operators including Lieutenant Kira Ashford, the most gifted sniper Nash had ever known, had been compromised, surrounded, ammunition running critically low. The enemy had known they were coming. Someone had sold them out even then. Nash could still hear her voice over the radio, calm, certain, 25 years old and already a legend in the making. "I'm taking the ridge. Fall back through the ravine. I'll cover you." He'd argued. God, how he'd argued. "Lieutenant, that ridge is exposed. You'll be a sitting duck up there." "I'll be a distraction. There's a difference." "Kira, that's an order, Commander." Her voice had gone hard then. She'd technically outranked him on that operation. "I've calculated the odds. It's 8 lives for 1. Do the math and fall back." The military trains you to follow orders, even when those orders taste like ash in your mouth. Even when you absolutely know, that following them means leaving someone behind to die. So Nash had run. He'd led his team through that ravine while Kira's rifle sang its deadly song behind them, each crack buying them a few more seconds of life, each kill giving them a few more meters of distance from the enemy that had been moments away from overrunning their position. The last thing he'd heard before her radio went silent was her voice. Still calm, still certain. "You're clear. Go home, Nash." Then nothing. They'd searched for 5 days when the weather finally broke, found blood in the snow, spent brass casings scattered across the ridge like copper prayers, signs of a last stand that had lasted far longer than physics should have allowed. But no body. The mountains had claimed her. Or so the official report said. Missing in action, presumed killed in action. A memorial service with a folded flag that Nash had accepted on behalf of a team that had lost its soul. Back at base, after the memorial service, Nash had met with Colonel Garrett Blackwell, the old CIA operative, 62 then, already showing signs of the heart condition that would eventually kill him, had pulled Nash aside. "She was the best I ever trained," Blackwell had said quietly, his voice rough with emotion that 17 years in the shadows hadn't quite managed to eliminate. "And I sent her to die." "You gave the order?" "I advised it. Tactically sound. 8 lives for one. The math was clear." Blackwell's voice had cracked. "But that doesn't make it easier. Doesn't make it right." He'd handed Nash a card, a contact number, nothing else. "If you ever hear anything at all, about unusual sniper activity in that sector, you call me, immediately." "Sir, she's gone." "Maybe, but Kira Ashford doesn't die easy. I trained her too well for that." Blackwell's eyes had held something Nash couldn't quite identify. Hope? Desperation? "I spent 2 years teaching that woman every dirty trick I learned in 40 years of CIA operations. If anyone could survive what we put her through, it's her." Nash had kept that card for 3 years. Never called it. Never had a reason to. Until now. He'd carried the weight of leaving her behind every single day since. The guilt was a constant companion, a voice in his head that whispered in the quiet moments between missions. "You ran. You left her. You're alive because she died." The second shot came from a completely different angle. Whoever was out there, and Nash's brain was screaming that it couldn't be, it absolutely could not be Kira because she was dead. She'd been dead for 3 years. Had repositioned across hundreds of meters of brutal terrain in less than 60 seconds. The round found the heavy weapons specialist who'd been setting up a PKM machine gun on their eastern flank. The man dropped without even the chance to scream. "Contact!" Webb shouted, spinning toward the new angle. "Contact our 6. "Wait, that came from behind us too. There's no one behind us." "Then who the hell is shooting?" Torres demanded, his voice rising with panic that 17 years of training couldn't quite suppress. That's when Nash's radio crackled, not on the standard frequency, on an old encryption protocol, one that had been retired 3 years ago when its primary user was declared killed in action. The signal was weak, barely there, but the pattern was unmistakable. 3 short bursts, 2 long, 1 short, a path marker. Nash's hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the radio. He pulled out his GPS unit, and there it was, a route plotted through the frozen marshland that stretched to their east. A route that avoided the obvious paths where ambushes would be waiting. A route that showed safe ice, solid ground, natural cover. No one could have this intelligence without real-time observation from an elevated position, without intimate knowledge of this terrain, without having spent years, 3 years, studying every inch of this frozen hell. "Is someone guiding us?" Dr. Carter asked. Her scientific mind was starting to override her terror, looking for patterns in the chaos. "Yes," Nash heard himself say, and then, more quietly, to himself, "someone who's supposed to be dead." Kira Ashford had been 22 when Nash first met her, fresh out of advanced sniper training with scores that made instructors shake their heads in disbelief. She could read wind patterns better than meteorologists. She could calculate bullet trajectories in her head faster than most people could work a calculator. She had a gift for the rifle that bordered on supernatural. But what had made her special, what had made her legendary, wasn't just the technical skill. It was the way she thought about the rifle as a tool of strategy rather than simple violence. She called it pruning, cutting away the branches of command until the entire tree collapsed on its own. Nash had watched her clear an enemy strongpoint from 800 meters out, picking off targets through window frames with shots that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Had seen her hold an extraction point for 9 hours straight, her rifle never cooling, her concentration never breaking. Had seen her do things that made other snipers retire out of shame because they knew they'd never reach that level. She'd saved his life twice before the mission that killed her. The first time had been in Kandahar, an ambush, Nash pinned behind a burning vehicle with an insurgent drawing a bead on his head. He'd made his peace with God in that moment. Then the insurgent's head had exploded. Then the insurgent behind him, and the one behind that. 7 kills in 11 seconds from over 1,000 meters away, in the middle of a dust storm, with visibility near zero. Clear, Kira's voice had come over the radio, calm as Sunday morning. "You're welcome, Commander." The second time had been in the Korangal Valley, a mission gone wrong. 3 men wounded, extraction compromised. Kira had positioned herself on a ridge and held back an entire enemy platoon for 9 hours while the rescue birds finally made it through. When they'd extracted her, she'd been down to her last magazine. Her rifle barrel had been so hot, it had warped slightly. Her hands were bleeding from working the bolts so many times. But she'd been smiling. "Sorry about the wait," she'd said. "I was counting rounds, had to make them last." The third time she tried to save him, she hadn't made it out. "Chief," Lawson's voice pulled Nash back to the present. "Chief, you look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have." Nash pulled up the GPS route with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The path was marked in detail that shouldn't be possible. Safe ice, solid ground, natural cover, exact distances between waypoints. Someone had spent considerable time mapping this route. Someone who knew this terrain better than the locals. Someone who'd been watching, waiting, preparing for this exact scenario. "Everyone," Nash said into the team frequency, his voice steadier than he felt. "We follow the GPS route exactly. Single file, 5-meter intervals. Watch where I step and step exactly where I do. We move in 30 seconds. "Chief," Lawson started. "That's not a suggestion, petty officer. That's an order." He could see the struggle in their eyes. Following a ghost's guidance through a frozen death trap wasn't something sane operators volunteered for. But they were SEALs. They followed orders. And more importantly, they trusted their commander with their lives. Even when that commander was trusting a dead woman's ghost. "If Lieutenant Ashford really is alive," Lawson said quietly, "if she's really out there after 3 years, then we owe her a conversation," Nash finished. "But first, we survive. Move." They moved. The marsh stretched before them like a frozen nightmare. Thin ice hiding deep water. Solid-looking ground that would swallow a man whole if he stepped wrong. Natural paths that looked safe, but led directly into prepared killing zones. Nash followed the GPS signal like a man following a prayer. Behind them, the enemy was in chaos. Their commander was dead. Their communications specialist was dead. Half their squad leaders were dead. No one was coordinating the pursuit anymore. That was Kira's work. If it really was Kira out there in the snow and darkness. That was how she'd always fought. Not with overwhelming force, but with surgical precision. Remove the brain, the body flounders. "Contact rear," Torres shouted suddenly. Nash spun to see a 4-man patrol emerging from the tree line. They'd somehow managed to follow despite the chaos. They were spreading out, raising weapons, preparing to fire. 4 shots in under 8 seconds. Each one found its mark with the casual perfection of someone for whom this was simply another day at the office. The 4 men dropped without ever firing a round. "Jesus Christ," Martinez breathed. Nash scanned the ridgeline through his scope, searching for any sign of the shooter. No muzzle flash, no silhouette, just the endless snow and the silence between gunshots. Phantom, indeed. They kept moving. The ice creaked beneath their weight but held, Guided by GPS coordinates that proved unerringly accurate, the signal led them around weak spots, through covered positions, along routes that seemed to exist specifically for escaping this exact scenario. Every few minutes, another shot would ring out. Another pursuer would fall. The enemy's command structure was being systematically dismantled by someone they couldn't see, couldn't find, couldn't stop. "She's been here the whole time," Lawson said quietly, almost to himself. 3 years, watching, waiting. "You don't know that," Webb countered, but his voice lacked conviction. "What else explains this?" Lawson gestured at the GPS, at the bodies scattered behind them, at the impossible precision of kills that were coming from angles that shouldn't exist. "She knows every inch of this terrain, every enemy position, every patrol route. You don't learn that in a week or a month." Nash said nothing, because Lawson was right. If Kira was alive, and with each impossible shot, that if was becoming more and more certain, then she'd spent 3 years alone in hostile territory. 3 years surviving where survival seemed impossible. 3 years becoming something more than the young lieutenant he'd known. What had that done to her? What would 3 years of absolute isolation do to anyone? The GPS pulsed with a new direction. Nash adjusted course without hesitation. His team followed like shadows, trusting in the ghost that was guiding them home. They traveled nearly a kilometer when the radio crackled again, this time with actual words. "Ambush 200 meters northeast. 4 hostiles in tree line. Wait." The voice was female, harder than he remembered, colder, shaped by 3 years of speaking only to herself and her rifle. But it was her. "Copy," Nash whispered into his radio, barely audible. A pause. Then, with that ghost of dark humor he remembered, "You always followed instructions poorly, Commander. I said wait, not whisper like an idiot." Despite everything, the cold, the danger, the impossibility of this moment, Nash felt himself smile. 4 shots rang out in rapid succession, each one a period at the end of a sentence. "Clear," Kira's voice said. "Move quickly. Reinforcements inbound. 3 minutes out." They moved. Dr. Carter was struggling now. The scientist wasn't built for this kind of movement. The cold, the terrain, the constant threat of death. She stumbled twice, caught by Martinez both times, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "I can't," she panted. "I can't keep going." "You can," Nash said firmly, "and you will." "My legs won't." "Your legs will work until I tell them to stop. Move." She moved, because there wasn't another option. Because when violence professionals give orders in combat zones, survival instincts override exhaustion. The GPS led them to a ridge overlooking a small valley. Below, Nash could see the natural choke point, the only path reinforcements could take to reach their position. "She's funneling them," Lawson realized. "She's herding us here so she can deal with the pursuit in one place." "Setting up a kill box," Webb agreed. "With us as—" "Not bait," Nash interrupted. "Protected assets. She's not using us. She's covering us." The first wave of reinforcements appeared in the valley below. 12 men moving fast, weapons ready, confident in their numbers. The first shot dropped the lead man. The second shot dropped the man behind him. The third, fourth, and fifth shots came so fast they almost seemed like a single extended crack of thunder. The remaining 7 men dove for cover, firing wildly at a shooter they couldn't locate. But there was no cover in that valley. That's why Kira had chosen it. Every rock, every tree, every piece of terrain had a clear line of sight from her position, wherever that position was. One by one, they fell. 7 shots, 7 kills, 32 seconds from start to finish. Nash had seen a lot of killing in his career. This was different. This wasn't combat. This was execution. Methodical, impersonal, absolute. "She's not the same," Martinez said quietly. "Whatever she was before, that's not who she is now." Nash watched the last body fall. 3 years alone will change anyone. But she's still saving our lives, Webb pointed out. That has to count for something. The radio crackled. Move now. Safe house 1 click northeast. Follow the markers. They moved. The safe house turned out to be a cave system carved into the mountainside. Invisible from the air, defended by natural choke points that would turn any assault into suicide. Inside, they found evidence of long-term habitation, preserved food stores, water collection systems, weapons caches, maps covering every inch of the surrounding territory, marked with enemy positions, patrol routes, supply lines, and red X marks, dozens of them, each one indicating an eliminated target. She's been here the whole time, Webb said again, his voice hollow with understanding. This isn't survival, this is war. One woman against an entire enemy network, Lawson agreed. For 3 years. Nash found a journal near a makeshift desk. The entries were sparse, clinical, but they told a story of unimaginable resilience. Day 47. Established observation post overlooking eastern approach. Enemy uses this route for supply runs every 3rd day. Predictable. Day 183. Eliminated enemy commander suspected of ordering interrogation protocols. 3 rounds, 1,100 meters. Win compensation 3.4 MOA left. Day 412. Intercepted communications suggesting American operation in sector. Will observe and provide support if necessary. Day 847. They came. Nash's team. Finally, after all this time, finally. Nash's hands trembled as he read that last entry. She'd been waiting for him to come back. Chief, Martinez said softly, you need to hear this. She was holding the radio. Kira's voice was coming through, and for the first time, it didn't sound calm. It sounded human. 30-plus enemy reinforcements converging on your position. They know where the safe house is. They've always known. They've been waiting for someone to lead them to it. A pause, heavy with implications. I made a mistake. I thought I had more time. Nash grabbed the radio. Kira, where are you? That doesn't matter right now. What matters is you have approximately 15 minutes before they reach you. Another pause. Longer this time. There's a back exit. Follow the tunnel until you reach the ridge. I've marked an extraction point 2 clicks east. Your helicopter can approach from there. And what about you? Silence. Kira, what about you? I'm going to do what I've been doing for 3 years, Nash. I'm going to prune the tree. That's 30-plus hostiles. You can't. I've killed more than that this week alone. Trust me. Her voice softened slightly, just enough for him to hear the person underneath the weapon she'd become. Go. Nash's grip on the radio tightened until his knuckles went white. 3 years ago, he'd followed her orders and run. 3 years ago, he'd left her behind on that ridge. I'm not leaving you again. You're not leaving. You're completing the mission. You're protecting the asset. That's what you do, Nash. That's what we both do. A pause. I didn't survive 3 years just to watch you die because you got sentimental. Take your team. Take the scientist. Get out. I'll find my own way. Like last time. The words hung in the air, heavy with 3 years of guilt and grief. Last time I chose to stay, Kira said quietly. This time, I'm choosing to come back. But first, I have to finish this. There are men out there who know my location now. Men who've been hunting me for 3 years. If I don't eliminate them, they'll keep hunting. They'll never stop. For real this time? You promise? A soft sound that might have been a laugh. I don't make promises anymore, Nash, but I make intentions. And my intention is to see your face when I walk out of these mountains alive. The radio clicked off. Nash stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the past 3 years pressing down on him like the mountain itself. Around him, his team waited. Dr. Carter waited. The clock was ticking. 15 minutes. Chief, Lawson's voice was gentle. What do we do? Nash looked at the tunnel entrance, the path to safety, the route Kira had marked for them with the same meticulous care she'd shown in everything she did. Then he looked back at the maps, at the journals, at 3 years of one woman's private war against an enemy that should have crushed her. "We move," he said finally. "We take the tunnel. We get to extraction." "And Lieutenant Ashford?" Nash picked up his rifle, checked his ammunition, set his jaw with a determination that came from somewhere deeper than training. "Lieutenant Ashford just told us she's coming home. I'm going to make damn sure there's a home for her to come back to." They moved into the tunnel. Behind them, somewhere in the frozen darkness, a ghost prepared for her final hunt. And somewhere in the mountains, 30-plus enemy soldiers had no idea that death was already watching them through a rifle scope, counting their heartbeats, waiting for the perfect moment to add 30 more red X marks to a map that had become her entire world. The tunnel swallowed them whole. Nash led the way, his flashlight cutting through darkness so complete it felt like drowning. Behind him, 6 operators and 1 terrified scientist moved in single file, their breathing loud in the confined space. The tool marks on the walls told a story of patient determination. Someone had spent months, maybe years, widening this natural passage, creating an escape route that didn't exist on any map. They traveled maybe 200 meters when Nash heard it, distant, muffled by rock and earth, but unmistakable. Explosions. Kira had engaged. The tunnel began to slope upward. Fresh air reached Nash's lungs, carrying the faint smell of snow and gunpowder. They were close to the exit. Behind them, the sounds of battle continued. Each explosion was calculated, each placement surgical. Kira wasn't just fighting, she was orchestrating the systematic destruction of everyone who'd been hunting her. The tunnel opened onto a narrow ridge overlooking the eastern valley. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink. In the distance, the safe house was burning. Nash raised his binoculars. Bodies littered the ground. Vehicles were destroyed. And somewhere in that chaos, Kira was finishing what she'd started 3 years ago. "Chief," Webb called out, "helicopters inbound. 3 minutes." Nash scanned the battlefield one more time, counted the bodies, calculated the odds. She was winning. The helicopter appeared over the ridge, its approach perfect despite the challenging terrain. The pilot brought it down fast and clean. "Go, go, go!" Lawson shouted. The team loaded quickly, Martinez first, Webb, Torres, Kowalski, Reeves, Chen. Dr. Carter practically thrown inside. Nash remained on the ground. "Chief," Lawson shouted, "we need to go." She said she was coming back, and she will, but not if we're dead. The pilot's voice crackled over the radio. "Chief, enemy movement 2 clicks south. We lift in 60 seconds, or we don't lift at all." Nash's hand found the doorframe. His feet found the skid, but his eyes stayed locked on the tree line. "Come on, Kira. Come on." 45 seconds. The fires were spreading now. If Kira was still in that inferno, 30 seconds. "Chief, we have to go." 15 seconds. Nash pulled himself into the helicopter. The bird began to rise, and then a voice crackled over the old frequency, weak but unmistakable. "You were going to leave without saying goodbye." Nash lunged for the cockpit. "Hold! Hold the bird!" "Chief, we can't. I said hold." The pilot cursed but leveled out, hovering 15 feet off the ground. Nash grabbed the doorframe and leaned out. There, at the edge of the clearing, a figure emerging from the shadows, moving slowly, deliberately, like someone who'd been running on nothing but willpower for far too long. Kira Ashford walked out of the darkness and into the light. She looked like death walking. Her ghillie suit was torn and burned. Her face was covered in smoke and blood. Her rifle was slung across her back, the barrel still hot enough to shimmer in the cold air. But she was walking. She was alive. She was coming home. "Lower the bird," Nash shouted. "Get us down there." "Chief, we've got incoming." "Lower the damn bird." The pilot dropped them to 5 feet. Nash jumped before the skids touched snow, running toward Kira before he'd even found his balance. She stopped walking when he reached her. Just stopped, standing there in the snow, looking at him with eyes that had seen 3 years of hell and somehow found their way back. "You came back," Nash said, his voice rough with emotion he didn't try to hide. "I told you I would. You told me a lot of things 3 years ago. You told me you'd catch up. You told me to go home. I told you what you needed to hear to survive." Kira's voice was steady, but there was something beneath it, something fragile. "If I'd told you the truth, you would have stayed, and you would have died." "What truth?" "That I wasn't planning to make it out, that I'd made my peace with dying on that ridge." She paused. "What I didn't plan was surviving. What I didn't plan was waking up in an enemy camp." "Kira, they tried to break me, Nash. For 6 weeks they tried. Waterboarding, beatings, isolation. Everything Blackwell trained me to resist." Her voice was flat, emotionless, the voice of someone reciting facts. "And when they couldn't break me, they decided I was useless. They were going to execute me." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "They underestimated how motivated a woman can be when she's angry." "You escaped." "I killed 3 guards with my bare hands, took a rifle, disappeared into the mountains." She looked back at the burning command post. "And I decided that if I was going to die out here, I was going to take as many of them with me as possible." 3 years. 3 years of hunting. 3 years of making them afraid of shadows. 3 years of waiting for a reason to stop. Kira turned back to him. "Now I'm tired, Nash. So tired. And I want to go home." Nash reached out and took her hand. She flinched. 3 years without human touch, but didn't pull away. "Then let's go home." They walked toward the helicopter together. The team made room. Kira collapsed into a seat, her eyes closing immediately. The helicopter lifted off, banking hard toward friendly territory. Kira's breathing slowed. Her grip on Nash's hand relaxed. For the first time in 3 years, she let herself fall into something like sleep. And for the first time in 3 years, Nash felt the weight on his chest begin to lift. She was alive. She was here. And whatever came next, they'd face it together. The helicopter touched down at Forward Operating Base Sentinel 3 hours after dawn. Nash was first out, his boots hitting concrete that felt strange after hours on ice and snow. His team followed in rapid succession, moving with the exhausted efficiency of men who'd survived what they shouldn't have. Kira came last. She stepped onto the tarmac carefully, like someone testing whether solid ground was real or just another hallucination. Her hand moved instinctively toward the rifle slung across her back, a gesture so automatic she probably didn't even realize she was doing it. "Easy," Nash said quietly, positioning himself between her and the medical team that was already rushing toward them. "You're safe here." "Safe." Kira repeated the word like it was in a foreign language. "I don't remember what that feels like." The medics approached with a stretcher, IV bags, eager hands reaching to help. Kira's entire body went rigid. "Don't touch me." The lead medic, a Navy captain whose name tag read Rodriguez, stopped immediately. "Ma'am, you need medical attention. You're clearly—" "I said don't touch me." Kira's voice could have frozen the tarmac. "I've been handling my own wounds for 3 years. I'll continue to do so." Nash intervened before the situation could escalate. "Give her space. She'll submit to medical when she's ready." "Chief, protocol requires—" "Protocol can wait." Nash turned to Kira, his voice gentle. "But you do need to be checked out. You're running on empty." Kira stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once, sharply. "Fine, but I choose the doctor. And I want a debriefing scheduled for 1400 hours. Her eyes swept the base, cataloging everything. "There are things your intelligence community needs to hear." "About the mole," Nash said. "About everything." The base commander, Colonel Hayes, a man in his mid-50s whose face carried the weight of too many difficult decisions, stepped forward carefully. Lieutenant Ashford, I've read the preliminary report. It's quite a story. It's not a story, Colonel. It's an intelligence briefing waiting to happen. That briefing will occur when we determine you're fit to give it. Hayes's eyes swept over her, dirty, exhausted, clearly operating on her last reserves. Right now, you need medical evaluation, psychological assessment, and right now I need you to listen. Kira's voice cut like a blade. While I was fighting a one-woman war to keep American operations safe, someone in your intelligence apparatus was selling those operations to the enemy. I have 3 years of evidence, communications intercepts, pattern analysis, names, dates, and operational details. She stepped closer to Hayes. Every hour you delay, that evidence becomes less useful. Every hour you delay, the traitor gets more warning. Hayes's face reddened. You expect me to convene an emergency intelligence briefing based on the word of a woman who's been declared dead for 3 years? I expect you to do your job, Colonel, unless doing your job conflicts with someone else's interests. The accusation hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Nash stepped between them before the situation could explode. Colonel, Lieutenant Ashford just eliminated 34 enemy combatants to ensure our extraction. She has information that could save lives. All she's asking for is a chance to share it. Hayes studied Nash for a long moment. Then Kira. The calculation was visible on his face. Protocol versus pragmatism. Authority versus necessity. 1,400 hours, he said finally. Briefing room 1. You get one chance to make your case. Waste it, and you'll spend the next month in psychiatric hold. I don't waste opportunities, Colonel. I learned that lesson the hard way. Hayes turned and walked away without another word. Kira watched him go, her eyes cataloging every detail. He's nervous. Did you see how he reacted when I mentioned the mole? He's not the traitor, Nash said. He doesn't have the composure for it. Maybe, but he knows something. Kira looked at Nash. The mole is here, on this base or connected to it. They knew about your mission because someone here told them. That's a serious accusation. It's a fact. Her jaw tightened. I just need to find out who. The medical examination took 2 hours. Kira submitted to it with barely concealed impatience, answering Rodriguez's questions in monosyllables and refusing to elaborate on injuries that clearly had stories behind them. Rodriguez documented everything with professional detachment. Multiple healed fractures, evidence consistent with torture. 3 gunshot wounds that had been self-treated with field medicine that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. Severe malnutrition, chronic dehydration, muscle damage from extreme physical stress sustained over an extended period, and psychological indicators that concerned her deeply. When Rodriguez finally emerged from the examination room, Nash was waiting outside. How is she? Physically, she'll live. The human body is remarkably resilient when properly motivated. Rodriguez lowered her voice. But psychologically, Chief, that woman has been in survival mode for 3 years. The mind isn't built for that kind of sustained stress. What are you saying? I'm saying she needs psychiatric evaluation before any debriefing. The things she's experienced, the isolation, the violence, it changes people in ways that aren't immediately obvious. She seems lucid. Lucid doesn't mean stable. Functional doesn't mean healthy. Rodriguez pulled out a tablet showing Nash the scan results. Her stress hormone levels are off the charts. Her fight or flight response is permanently activated. She's operating in a state of constant hypervigilance that will take months, maybe years, to normalize. Nash studied the scans. What do you recommend? Ideally, 6 months of intensive therapy before we even consider operational duties. Realistically, Rodriguez sighed, she's not going to accept that, so we monitor her closely, watch for signs of decompensation, and hope that whatever she's carrying doesn't crush her before she learns to put it down. Nash found Kira sitting on the edge of the examination table, staring at nothing. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the sterile environment and harsh lighting. "The doctor thinks I'm crazy," she said without looking up. "The doctor thinks you've been through something traumatic." Same thing in her profession. Kira finally met his eyes. "Am I, Nash? Am I crazy? What do you think?" "I think I killed 34 people last night without hesitation. I think I've spent 3 years becoming very good at ending lives. I think there's a part of me that enjoyed it." Her voice dropped. "At what point does that make me a monster?" Nash sat down beside her. "You did what you had to do to survive." "Did I? Or did I choose to stay because some part of me wanted the excuse to keep killing?" "You stayed to protect American operations. You stayed because you identified a threat and chose to neutralize it. I stayed because going home meant facing what I'd become." Kira looked down at her hands. "Out there I knew who I was, a weapon, a tool, something with a clear purpose. But here, I don't know how to be a person anymore. Don't know how to exist when there's no one trying to kill me." Nash took her hand carefully. "Then we figure it out, together, one day at a time." Kira's fingers curled around his. The gesture was hesitant, unfamiliar, but she didn't pull away. "Okay," she said quietly. "Together." At precisely 1400 hours, Kira walked into briefing room 1. 18 people sat around the table. Intelligence officers from 3 different agencies. Military brass from every branch. A woman in civilian clothes whose cold eyes and perfect posture screamed CIA. And at the head of the table, Colonel Hayes, flanked by Deputy Director Claire Vaughn, a woman in her early 50s with blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun and a face that revealed nothing. Kira had been studying Vaughn since the moment she entered. The way she held herself, the micro-expressions that flickered when certain topics came up, the practiced neutrality that came from decades of intelligence work. 30 years of tradecraft didn't disappear just because you were sitting in a briefing room. Nash stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching everything. Kira had insisted he be present. He was her anchor, her connection to the world she'd left behind. "Before I begin," Kira said, her voice cutting through the murmured conversations, "I want to make something clear. I'm not here to justify my actions. I'm not here to defend my decision to remain in hostile territory for 3 years." She pressed a button, and a map appeared on the screen behind her. "I'm here because there's a traitor in American intelligence. Someone who's been selling operational details to the enemy for years. And if you don't find them, more people are going to die." The room went silent. 3 years ago, I was part of an operation that was compromised before we even landed. The enemy knew we were coming. They knew our routes, our timing, our objectives. My team was ambushed. I made the decision to provide cover while they extracted. She pulled up a timeline. I was captured 6 weeks later. During interrogation, my captors knew things about American operations that should have been classified. Patrol routes, communication protocols, details that indicated ongoing access to intelligence. Vaughn leaned forward slightly. "Lieutenant Ashford, you're suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything, Deputy Director. I'm stating facts." Kira's eyes locked onto Vaughn's. "After I escaped, I began monitoring enemy communications. Over 3 years, I documented a pattern. 17 American operations in this sector were compromised before execution." She pulled up a series of documents: communications intercepts, pattern analysis, correlation charts. Every single one of these operations was briefed through the same facility, through the same secure channel, to the same distribution list. Someone with access to that list has been feeding information to the enemy. One of the intelligence officers spoke up. "This is a serious accusation. You're claiming that someone in this room—" "I'm claiming that the tradecraft I observed matches Russian SVR methodology from the 1990s. Whoever is doing this has been operating as a penetration agent for decades. They're skilled, experienced, and deeply embedded." Kira paused, letting that information settle. 18 months ago, I took a risk. I used a dead drop, one Colonel Garrett Blackwell set up during his CIA days, to send a coded warning about the leak. He was the only person I trusted with this information, the only one who'd understand the tradecraft I was seeing. Nash's expression didn't change, but Kira saw the subtle tension in his shoulders. She was dropping Blackwell's name for the first time, establishing his importance. The message was received, the confirmation protocol was activated, and nothing happened. Operations kept being compromised. Good men kept dying. "Why didn't you try again?" Vaughn asked, her voice calm and professional. "Why didn't you make direct contact?" "Because the only way my warning could have been ignored is if the mole intercepted it, or if the person who received it was the mole themselves." Kira pulled up another document. The dead drop confirmation came from this facility's SCIF on April 15th, 2023. 4 people had access to secure communications that night. She highlighted 4 names. Captain James Moore died in a single vehicle accident 3 weeks later. Lieutenant Sarah Davis, transferred to Germany 6 weeks later, hasn't been heard from since. Sergeant Michael Kowalski, deployed to Iraq 8 weeks later, currently unreachable. Kira's eyes found Vaughn across the table. And Deputy Director Claire Vaughn, still here, still in a position of power, still with access to every piece of classified intelligence that flows through this sector. The room erupted. Voices rose in protest. Hayes was on his feet. The intelligence officers talked over each other. Through it all, Vaughn sat perfectly still. Her expression hadn't changed. Her hands were folded calmly on the table. And that told Kira everything she needed to know. "You're accusing me of treason," Vaughn said quietly, cutting through the chaos, "based on circumstantial evidence and the fact that 3 other people are conveniently unavailable. I'm stating a pattern that could have multiple explanations." Vaughn stood slowly. "Lieutenant Ashford, I understand what you've been through. 3 years of isolation would make anyone see threats where none exist, would make anyone paranoid." She turned to Hayes. "Colonel, I recommend Lieutenant Ashford be detained pending psychiatric evaluation and a full investigation into her activities. She's clearly—" "No." The word came from Nash, and it stopped everyone cold. He stepped forward from his position against the wall. "With respect, Deputy Director, Lieutenant Ashford has provided credible intelligence about a threat to national security. Your immediate response is to silence her and question her sanity. That's exactly what a mole would do." Vaughn's eyes narrowed. "Commander Drummond, you're emotionally compromised. Your relationship with Lieutenant Ashford is professional. She saved my team's lives. She has 3 years of intelligence that no one else possesses. She tried to warn us 18 months ago about a leak that has cost American lives." Nash turned to the room. "The only question that matters is why. Why was her warning ignored? Why were 3 of the 4 people who could have received it eliminated or removed? And why is Deputy Director Vaughn so eager to discredit the one person asking these questions?" Hayes had been silent through this exchange. Now he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been reviewing the same patterns Lieutenant Ashford identified. The correlation between compromised operations and Deputy Director Vaughn's access to intelligence." He looked directly at Vaughn. "I've had concerns about operational security in this sector for months. I just didn't have the evidence to voice them." Vaughn's composure cracked. Just slightly, a tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible tension in her shoulders. "Colonel, you're making a serious mistake." "Maybe, but I'd rather make that mistake than bury another intelligence report." Hayes nodded to the MPs at the door. "Deputy Director Vaughn, you're being placed under administrative detention pending investigation." For a moment, Kira thought Vaughn might resist. Her hand moved toward her jacket, but Kira was faster. She crossed the room in 3 steps, her hand clamping down on Vaughn's wrist before anyone else could react. "Don't." Kira said softly. I've killed 34 people in the last 24 hours. One more won't cost me any sleep. Vaughn's eyes met Kira's. I'm detained. If I'm removed from my position, the real traitor will know. They'll run, disappear, and you'll never find them. Kira's grip didn't loosen. Who is it? I don't know, but I've been investigating for 6 months. I was getting close. Nash stepped forward. You're saying someone deliberately kept Lieutenant Ashford stranded? I'm saying someone who knew that if she ever made it back, she'd bring evidence that could expose them. Vaughn looked at Kira with something approaching respect. You surviving for 3 years wasn't just inconvenient. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Kira released Vaughn's wrist slowly. Her mind was racing through implications. If Vaughn was telling the truth, and every instinct said she was, then they just played into the real mole's hands. You're saying you're not the traitor. I'm saying I've been hunting the traitor, using my position to trace communications, identify patterns, narrow down suspects. Vaughn rubbed her wrist. I was playing the same game you were, Lieutenant, watching, waiting, looking for tells. And did you find any? Vaughn's eyes swept the room. 3 people in this room showed relief when I ordered your detention. 3 people who should have been concerned about finding a traitor showed satisfaction instead. Who? I can't prove anything yet. That's why I needed more time. Vaughn straightened her jacket. Time we no longer have. Kira and Vaughn stared at each other. 2 predators recognizing a fellow hunter. Then we work together, Kira said. Pool our intelligence. Find the real traitor. You trust me now? I don't trust anyone, but I believe you're not the leak, and that makes you useful. Kira turned to Hayes. Colonel, release the deputy director and lock down this facility. No communications in or out until we identify the mole. Hayes hesitated. That's an extreme measure. The enemy knows we're hunting them. If they haven't run yet, they will the moment they get a message out. Hayes made the call. 40 minutes later, the base was sealed. Kira stood in the intelligence center, staring at a board covered with names and photographs. Vaughn worked beside her, adding data from her own investigation. 17 compromised operations, Kira murmured. 43 casualties. 3 years of betrayal. The distribution list included over 30 people, Vaughn said. Any of them could be the leak. Then we narrow it down. Kira pulled up another file. Cross-reference with the dead drop. Who was in position to suppress my warning? Vaughn's fingers flew across the keyboard. Moore, Davis, Kowalski, and myself. All 4 of us had the access. And 3 of you were eliminated or removed. Convenient for someone. Vaughn highlighted new information. But look at this. All 3 reported to the same superior officer. A name appeared on the screen. Colonel Hayes. Nash stepped forward. You think Hayes is the mole? The evidence points to him, Vaughn said. Hayes had oversight. Hayes authorized the investigations. Hayes has been in this sector for 15 years. He also just detained you and authorized this lockdown, Kira pointed out. Why would he do that if he's the traitor? Because we forced his hand. When the room started turning against me, he had to make a choice. Look cooperative or confirm suspicions. Kira studied the data. Something didn't feel right. Hayes was nervous, yes, but nervous like a man who suspected something, not like a man who was guilty. Where is Hayes now? He left 20 minutes ago, Nash said. Said he needed to coordinate the lockdown. Kira's eyes met Vaughn's. The communications center. They ran. The communications center door was locked when they reached it. Kira didn't hesitate. She grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and swung it into the electronic lock with enough force to send sparks flying. The mechanism shattered. She kicked the door open. Hayes was standing at the main console, his back to them. His hands were raised, frozen, mid-keystroke. Step away from the console, Colonel. Hayes didn't move. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly. You've been selling American lives. You suppressed my warning. You got good men killed. Kira's voice was ice. Step away or I put you down where you stand. Slowly, Hayes turned. His face was pale. His eyes were wild with something that looked almost like relief. I'm not the mole, Ashford. The evidence says otherwise. The evidence was planted. Every connection, every paper trail, it was designed to point at me. Hayes's voice cracked. I figured it out 3 days ago. That's why I've been trying to send a warning. Not to the enemy, to Washington. Kira studied him. Something in his tone didn't match the profile of a cornered traitor. If you're innocent, why lock yourself in here? Because I knew you'd come for me, knew you'd see the patterns and reach the conclusion. Hayes lowered his hands slowly. I also knew the real traitor would be watching, waiting for exactly this moment. What moment? The moment when everyone's attention is focused on me instead of on them. Hayes's eyes moved past Kira toward the doorway. Kira spun. Vaughn had a pistol leveled at Nash's head. Don't move, Lieutenant. Vaughn's voice was calm, almost conversational. I've been doing this a long time. I won't miss. Nash froze. Kira saw the calculation in his eyes. The answer was clear. He couldn't disarm Vaughn before she fired. You, Kira breathed. Me. Vaughn smiled without warmth. 23 years of loyal service. The perfect cover. She gestured with the pistol. Drop your weapons, all of you. Kira's hand twitched toward her sidearm. Her mind calculated angles, distances, probabilities. I can see you thinking, Vaughn said. Let me save you the trouble. You're fast. Maybe the fastest I've seen. But not fast enough. Not before I pull this trigger. She pressed the pistol harder against Nash's temple. And we both know you won't sacrifice him to stop me. Kira's jaw tightened. Vaughn was right. Weapons down, Kira said quietly. She set her pistol on the floor. Hayes did the same. Good. Vaughn's smile widened. Now, Colonel, you're going to complete that transmission. But the message is different. You're going to confess to being the mole. Detail your crimes. Then announce you're taking your own life. That won't work, Hayes said. The investigation will find exactly what I want it to find. A confession. A body. Case closed. Vaughn's eyes swept the room. As for the rest of you, tragic casualties of the Colonel's breakdown. You've thought this through, Kira said. 3 years of wondering if that damn sniper would ever come down. 3 years of covering tracks, eliminating loose ends. Vaughn's voice hardened. You should have stayed dead, Ashford. Including the 43 Americans who died because of your intelligence? Acceptable losses. The information I sold saved 10 times as many lives as it cost. You're insane. I'm rational, Vaughn shrugged. Now, Colonel, the console, move. Hayes didn't move. No. Excuse me? I said no. You can kill me if you want, but I won't help you frame a dead man. Vaughn's expression flickered. Brave words from a man with no leverage. I have plenty of leverage. Hayes smiled grimly. You think I've just been typing? I've been recording this entire conversation, audio and video, uploaded to a secure server the moment you drew your weapon. Vaughn's face went pale. You're bluffing. Check the console, third monitor from the left. Vaughn's eyes darted to the monitor. Her grip on the pistol loosened for just a fraction of a second. Kira moved. 3 years of survival had honed her reflexes beyond human limits. She covered the distance in 2 steps, her hand closing around Vaughn's wrist before the deputy director could react. The pistol fired once. The bullet slammed into the ceiling. Then Kira twisted. Vaughn's wrist snapped with an audible crack. Vaughn screamed. The gun dropped. Kira kicked it away, then drove her elbow into Vaughn's solar plexus. The woman doubled over, gasping. Nash was already moving, securing Vaughn with zip ties while she writhed in pain. Is that recording real? Kira asked. Every word. Hayes's hands were shaking. I started recording when I realized I was being framed. If I was going down, I was taking the real traitor with me. Kira stared down at Vaughn. Why? Money? Ideology? Vaughn looked up, her face twisted with pain and contempt. I was recruited 20 years ago, young analyst with student debt. They offered money. I took it. Her laugh was bitter. It was supposed to be temporary, but once you start, you can't stop. They own you. Who's they? Russians, Chinese, private firms. The lines blur. Vaughn's eyes met Kira's. I'm not a traitor. I'm a commodity. You're making excuses. I'm explaining reality. You think I'm the only one? There are dozens like me. The system is rotten. Vaughn's voice dropped. Kill me. It won't change anything. Someone else will take my place. Kira crouched down until she was eye level with Vaughn. You're right. Someone else probably will. But that someone won't be you. And the next time American operators go into hostile territory, they won't have you selling their routes to the enemy. She stood. Get her out of my sight. The next few hours were a blur. Debriefings, statements, official reports. Hayes's recording was sent to oversight committees and the Inspector General. By morning, every relevant authority had evidence of Vaughn's confession. Kira stood in a different room now, smaller, quieter. Colonel Garrett Blackwell sat in a wheelchair, oxygen tubes running to his nose. He looked like death warmed over, but his eyes were sharp. You found her, Blackwell said to Nash, his voice weak. She found us, Nash corrected. Blackwell's eyes shifted to Kira. 3 years. They told me you were dead. I was, for a while. Kira's voice was neutral. Then I decided being dead was boring. A ghost of a smile crossed Blackwell's face. Same smart-ass attitude, good. I got your dead drop, Blackwell continued. April 2023, detailed warning about the leak. You received it. And I spent 18 months investigating, quietly, because I knew making noise would spook the mole. Blackwell's eyes hardened. I also knew that if I pulled you out, the trail would go cold. So I left you there, used you as my eyes. The words hung heavy. You used me, Kira said slowly. I did, and I won't apologize. You were doing more good than extraction could. You were saving lives. You could have told me. Would it have changed anything? Would you have come home? Kira was quiet, then, no. I know, because I trained you. Blackwell leaned forward. I'm sorry I used you, but I'm not sorry for the result. How many more would have died if you hadn't been there? That doesn't make it right. No, it makes it necessary. Kira stared at the old man who'd taught her everything. He looked so small now, so fragile. Why are you here? Because I'm dying. 3 months, maybe 4. Blackwell pulled out a folder. Before I go, I needed to see you and give you this. She opened it. A single sheet of paper, a designation, an authorization level that didn't officially exist. Phantom Protocol, she read, a program I started in '87. Black operations, deep cover, operators who work when they choose. Blackwell's eyes locked onto hers. You've been a ghost for 3 years. This makes it official. What about Commander Drummond? What about him? If I'm doing this, I need him. He's the only person I trust. Blackwell looked at Nash. You willing? Nash didn't hesitate. I'm not going anywhere. Good. Blackwell pulled out another folder. Welcome to Phantom Protocol. One more thing, Blackwell said, his voice weakening. Don't become what I was. Don't let the work consume you. He looked at both of them. Stay human. That's an order. Over the following months, Kira rebuilt her life piece by piece. The first month was the hardest. Nightmares, hypervigilance, the inability to be in crowded spaces without calculating threats. Nash was there for all of it, patient and steady, never pushing, always present. By month 2, she could sleep through the night. By month 3, she could walk into a grocery store without mapping exit routes. By month 4, she smiled more than she frowned. And by month 6, she was standing in Arlington Cemetery. The funeral had been small, quiet. Blackwell had requested no military honors, just a simple burial for a man who'd spent 40 years in shadows. Nash stood beside her. "He trained you," Nash said quietly. "He used me. Both things can be true." Kira knelt and placed something on the grave, her rifle, the weapon that had been her only companion for 3 years. "Mission complete, Colonel," she whispered. She stood holding Blackwell's old CIA badge from the 80s, worn, faded. "Time to teach," she said. Nash placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" "I don't know. He used me, manipulated me, left me out there for 18 months. Kira's voice was tight. "But he also trusted me, believed in me. He was complicated. He was a bastard." Kira turned to face Nash. "But he was our bastard." They stood in silence. Then Nash said, "What happens now? With us?" Kira looked at him, really looked at him. "I don't know how to do this, the human thing. 3 years alone broke something. Then we fix it together." Kira took his hand. "Together," she agreed. "But if you try to protect me in the field, I'm shooting you in the foot." Nash laughed. "Deal." 6 months after Vaughn's arrest, a classified file landed on a desk in a building that didn't exist. The director, a woman whose real name hadn't been spoken in a decade, opened it. Designation, Phantom. Specialty, long-range precision elimination. Availability, when required. Authorization, black. Attached was a note in Nash's handwriting. "She is not mine to command. She chooses her missions." The director smiled. She pressed a button. "File Phantom as active. Deep cover. On-call status. Any restrictions?" The director considered. "None. If we're calling her, it means we've run out of options." The file went into a drawer alongside others marked Spectre, Wraith, Widow, a collection of ghosts for impossible operations. Somewhere in the world, Kira Ashford was cleaning her rifle. 3 years had forged her into something new, something harder, but she'd found something else, a reason to keep fighting, a reason to come back. Her phone buzzed, a message from Nash. "Training facility, 0800 tomorrow. Young sniper needs guidance." Kira smiled. She typed back, "I'll be there." The next morning, Kira walked into the training facility at precisely 0800 hours. Nash was waiting with a young woman, dark hair, intense eyes. "Lieutenant Ashford, this is Corporal Maya Reeves, top of her class, requested assignment to your unit." Kira studied her, saw the eagerness, the confidence bordering on arrogance. "Why do you want this?" "Because you're the best, ma'am." "The best at what? Killing people?" Maya's confidence wavered. "At protecting people, ma'am." "Same thing in our line of work." Kira gestured to the range. "Show me." Maya moved to the firing line. 500 meters, perfect center mass. Again, 1,000 meters, another perfect shot. "You have skill," Kira said, "but when you take that shot, what do you feel?" "Satisfaction, ma'am." "Wrong answer." Maya's eyes widened. "If you feel satisfaction, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. This isn't about the shot, it's about what comes after. The person who doesn't come home, the family that gets a flag." Kira stepped closer. "My mentor taught me something. The moment you stop hesitating, the moment it becomes automatic, that's when you stop being human." She paused. "I've killed 121 people over 3 years. I remember every one, their faces, the way they fell, the sound." Kira's voice was quiet but firm. "That weight, that memory, that's the price. If you're not willing to carry it, walk away now." Maya was quiet. Then, "I understand, ma'am." "Do you?" "The skill doesn't matter if we lose ourselves. The skill keeps us alive. The humanity makes us worth keeping alive." Kira handed Maya a rifle. "One more shot, but before you take it, imagine that target is a person, with a family, dreams, a life. Then decide if you still want to pull that trigger. Maya took the rifle, moved to the line, set up, and hesitated. For just one heartbeat, she paused. Then she took the shot. Perfect. But her eyes had changed. Good, Kira said. That hesitation? Keep it. It's the only thing that separates us from the people we hunt. She turned to Nash. She'll do. Start her training tomorrow. As Kira walked away, Maya called out, Ma'am, what do I call you? Kira paused. Kira, we don't stand on ceremony. We're all just trying to stay human together. As Kira turned to leave, Nash called out, One more thing. There's a file on your desk. Kira raised an eyebrow. Already? Director says it's urgent. Eastern Europe. Sniper eliminating targets with impossible shots. Pattern matches old KGB methodology. Kira felt something cold settle in her chest. Spectre? One of Blackwell's other ghosts went dark 6 months ago. Nash's voice was quiet. They think he's been turned, and they want me to bring him in. They want you to find the truth. Kira looked back at Maya, still at the firing line. Tomorrow, Kira said. Maya starts tomorrow. Tonight, I hunt ghosts. She smiled, sharp and cold. Guess I'm not retired after all. Kira walked out into the sunlight. 3 years in the mountains, 6 months finding her way back. But she wasn't alone anymore. The phantom was home, and she was just getting started.